Donald Trump just walked back into the courtroom. That's where the former president is putting his fate into the hands of two veteran New York attorneys. Todd Blanche and Susan Nichols will be defending the former president, working to keep him out of prison. The Washington Post says, quote, people familiar with their work describe them as reputable lawyers who have experience to effectively defend Donald Trump in court if their famously combative and fickle client allows them to do their jobs. Joining us now is Robert Ray, a former member of Donald Trump's legal team during his first impeachment trial. Robert, it's really great to have you. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Just in this break, Donald Trump, just remind everyone, they went to break arguing over Donald Trump violating the gag order.
Right.
And the prosecution wants to fine him $1,000 for 3 separate Truth Social posts. He has just posted again about Alvin Bragg during this break. We all said, really? And you didn't flinch at all when we mentioned this. Why?
Well, to answer your first question about having highly experienced lawyers and allowing them to do their jobs, I definitely felt, just for whatever it's worth, that the former president, the then president, allowed me to do my job, which was to represent him before the Senate. So that's a big, part of it. I was very grateful to him for that opportunity, and he provided me with, a wide berth to be able to do what it is I thought I needed to do to effectively represent him, which is what you hope a client will allow you to do. As far as what's going on right now and sort of the pretrial skirmishes, yes, I think you can expect the DA's office to start to lay down markers, as they are starting to do, about what will be in bounds and what will be out of bounds. There was a certain amount of latitude that is afforded before a trial actually starts to allow Donald Trump the full exercise of his First Amendment rights. But once we get into the trial actually starting, and you can sort of decide when that is, but typically people understand it to be when the jury is sworn, you can expect this judge to crack down significantly and to have a very low tolerance level for extrajudicial statements that are made out into the media when a jury is starting to sit. Right now, be careful about overreacting too much to what's going on. This is the pretrial skirmish.
But let me ask you this, because if you're Todd Blanche or Susan Nichols and you're advising Donald Trump, obviously part of this, it seems, is playing to his base. It's playing to politics. He's in a campaign. This is who he is. This is what he says. This is what he does. He's painting this as the judicial system coming after him. So there's got to be a certain level of tolerance from the legal team of what Donald Trump is saying. So if you're looking at him, are you giving him boundaries? Are you saying you can keep doing this and you can keep doing that? You're probably going to get a fine here. You're probably going to get a warning here. Is there an array of options the legal team is giving him for him to off gas?
If you're a good lawyer, the answer is yes. You are trying to calibrate for your client, being on one side of the line versus really being in trouble. And I think they've probably advised him just what I told you, which is you're going to be afforded a certain amount of latitude given the fact that there's an ongoing campaign about what you can do and what you can say leading up to the trial.
Will they warn him?
And that calibration, I think the lawyers are telling the former president, will change once the jury is sworn.
Will they warn him that he can go to prison?
Sure.
Will
and nobody
he listen?
And nobody knows, one way or another. And also, I think with regard to high-profile clients, as a lawyer, you have to be careful about being too sure that you're right. Donald Trump has a fair amount of experience dealing with this, more than most of the lawyers that will advise him. He's the client. Ultimately, the client makes the call. All you can do is provide your best legal advice to the client. You hope that the client accepts your advice if you're right, and you're not. And sometimes you even will tell a client, I'm not too sure I'm right about this. This is what I think. You're asking me, you're paying me to render you advice. I know Todd Blanche very well. He's a very fine lawyer. And that's the kind of advice I'm sure that he's giving the former president.
He's somebody that, for a lot of folks, he seemed unlikely at one point, right? A registered Democrat, somebody who had a job at a prestigious Manhattan law firm. He's a partner at a law firm.
And people don't realize at what price that comes. I mean, he had to leave that firm to go out on his own. On the one hand, you can say this is sort of the representation of a lifetime. On the other, in the legal community, and given the dynamics in the city of New York and just the realities of things, people don't understand the price that you pay in order to be able to do something.
What is the price that you pay?
Well, the price that you pay is that everybody's entitled to a legal defense, including the former president of the United States. And when the legal community essentially tries to suggest that a representation like this is out of bounds, it has consequences to your reputation.
But how big of a gamble is it that Donald Trump will let him do his job? Because different from when you were involved, different than anything Donald Trump has faced, his civil cases, the stakes here, the consequences potentially for the election are so much different.
Sure, they are. I think Donald Trump makes judgments all the time about whether or not the advice that he's being given is actually good advice, and which is what every client has the right to do. He may be right about some of those judgments. He may be wrong. I think, you know, the battlefield is littered with a bunch of attorneys who it's not worked out. OK, let's say
that's true.
Let's say that. I think there are some that are better than others. I consider Todd to be one of those lawyers. The former president has chosen a very fine trial lawyer, which is what he needs right now.
But Robert, what would you be telling him about going on Truth Social and during a lunch break posting about the prosecutor, or over the weekend about one of the star witnesses, against the rules of a gag order?
Is it worth it?
Look, again, he wasn't the one that charged this case that ends up being a trial in the middle of a presidential campaign. So I am telling you the answer.
It wouldn't have been if there weren't so many delays, most of them coming from the defense side.
Doesn't matter, okay? I've been through this drill before as a prosecutor on the other side.
April 4th, a year ago.
Doesn't matter. It has landed in the middle of a presidential campaign. Donald Trump's first priority is campaigning for office.
Yeah.
You may like to think that his first priority should be what's happening in the courtroom. I am here to tell you that is not his first priority. His first priority
but he's doing it from the courtroom.
His priority is to run for and be elected president of the United States. He has a lawyer whose job it is to make sure that he survives this criminal trial.
Well, that's what I was trying to.
That's the bottom line.
That's what I was trying to get at with the first question. That obviously Donald Trump's going to do this. He's got a political reason to do this. What are the parameters that the lawyers will give him? And as you said, they will change as the trial goes on. They'll certainly change once the trial actually begins. I think just focusing on the attorneys for a second is really interesting, because Todd Blanche is a guy who's from Long Island. He put himself through law school after he was, I believe, clerking in the SDNY. He went to law school at Brooklyn Law. He's a grandfather, even though he's still a pretty young man. And he rose. He's not a Harvard-educated guy. He rose from what it looks like, I think appears to be a working-class background, put himself through law school, and then left this very prestigious law firm to take a gamble, to take a bet on Donald Trump. When you're talking about the legal community deciding that some people are worthy of representation and some people are not, when it's generally accepted that no matter what you do, you deserve a decent lawyer as a person in this country. I mean, lawyers have represented all sorts of people. And
uncontroversial or controversial causes. That the system depends on adequate legal representation, that these fights are supposed to happen ultimately inside of a courtroom, and that whether to win or lose, the fact is that you're upholding the best traditions of the legal profession. That is worthy of respect. Unfortunately, in the real world, it's not quite that simple.
Well, it sounds like you experienced this.
Of course. You're rattling off things. I'm a grandfather, too. Okay? I did not go to an Ivy League law school. Okay? I have been part of prestigious law firms. I know the choices that get made about whether or not you stay or remain based upon the clients you have or don't have. There are tough decisions that have to be made. I'd make them the same, all over again. But to suggest that they don't come without real life consequences is to, put your head in the sand and ignore, the realities of life. On balance, I mean, I've had a wonderful career, and I love what I do, and I love the fact that I've had opportunities to represent clients, including former President Trump.
Robert Ray, we could talk to you for a long time. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
We appreciate you coming on the show.
A pleasure.
Hey, everyone. MSNBC has a new and improved app. You'll get real-time alerts and analysis, live blogs, in-depth essays, video highlights, and the best 2024 election coverage. Download the new MSNBC app. Here's how to do it. You tap on the App Store on your phone. You hit search on the bottom right corner. You type in MSNBC. You click on the MSNBC app. You click on Get or the cloud icon and enjoy it.